Well, we have officially entered the season of Advent. It's an extra delight for me that we have snow on the ground this morning. I know those of you who have maybe lived your whole life in Missouri or with snow maybe don't feel that way, but I still do. Christmas lights are popping up everywhere. The sanctuary is looking beautiful. And I have a quick question. How many of you have decorated your house either inside or outside before Thanksgiving? Let's see a show of hands. This year. Yeah. Okay. A few of us. Okay. How many of you have decorated since Thanksgiving? Okay. A few of us. How many of you have not yet decorated? Okay. Most of us. All right. That's fair. So I did something a little different this year. I normally decorate early. I decorate before Thanksgiving, but not this year because my whole family was coming into town to celebrate Thanksgiving, so I wanted to lean into those fall vibes for just a little bit longer. But I did choose to put up my outside lights on Thanksgiving Day because, y'all, I had this vision, okay? I knew exactly what I wanted it to look like. Aaron and I have moved so much in our adult life that our outdoor decorations are just like a smattering of different things that we've collected along the way. When we lived in that apartment complex, we only bought icicle lights because all we had was a balcony. And then we moved to a house and it really only had bushes, so we bought like net lights for the bushes. And then we moved to a different house and we needed lights for the roof. And so we've just been collecting Christmas decorations along the way. So by the time we got here, we had all these decorations that didn't match the needs of our house and didn't match each other because they had just been like collected. So last year I went a little bit crazy. Lowe's was having a really great after Christmas sale. And I just add to cart. All of my vision centers around red and white candy cane lights. I love it when people put them on the trunks of trees and it's red and white. And so I went for it. And I have been waiting all year to put up my candy cane wonderland in my front yard. And so on Thanksgiving Day, Aaron and my mom were in the kitchen doing the cooking. Trust me, you want Aaron doing the cooking and not me. I was outside putting up the decorations. And it took all day. And I didn't wear gloves, and my hands were freezing, and my family thought I was crazy, but I was so excited. It felt like a new beginning. New yard, new lights, new beginning. And there was this one point where I was almost done. I just needed one more extension cord, so I ran back into the garage and opened a box to grab it, and there in that box were those old net lights. Those yellow and pink and blue and green net lights that we bought years ago for those bushes in our front yard that did not fit our new bushes and in no way matched my candy cane paradise. But for one brief moment, I was swept up in this nostalgia and I missed those lights. This exciting new beginning of the candy cane lights was also the end of an era, the end of the piecemeal decoration era. Those Christmas decorations that I never loved but still kind of cherished. And as I looked at those net lights, do you know what I did? Not a thing, because I have a candy cane paradise vision in my brain. But it did strike me that this new beginning was also an ending. And that felt fitting for the season of Advent because Advent is both an ending and a beginning. Chronologically, it comes at the end of the year. Some of us feel like it's the culmination of our year. But in so many other ways, Advent is the beginning. It's the beginning of the church calendar. The chronological year starts on January 1st, but the church year starts the first Sunday of Advent. It's the beginning of the story of God with us, God with dust on his feet. The birth of Jesus ushers in new paradigms and new worldviews and new ways to live and new ways to love. It's a new beginning. And each year in the church calendar, when we come back to Advent, we tell the story again. We remind ourselves of it. We make it a part of us again. This is what it means to remember. Not just to call to mind, but to connect it to ourselves again, to remember it to us. And each year, each time we remember, we enter another new beginning. And our Advent theme this year seeks to honor that. Our Advent theme this year is called Words for the Beginning. And it centers around phrases or lessons or truths of Advent that we learn that will bless us and that will bless this new beginning that we're entering into. And this is actually my prayer for this sermon series and for all of these Advent services, that they will be a blessing to us, that they will be the spiritual equivalent of a warm quilt or a nice cup of hot chocolate or apple cider or coffee on a cold day, that we'll feel wrapped in the warmth and the love of God as we enter another year and begin again. But I do need to offer a word of warning first. My sleeve just got caught on the podium. I love the Advent season. I love the robe and the stole, but I'm not always used to it. A word of warning. Because our Advent theme is talking about words from the beginning, there are going to be some scriptures that we read in the course of this Advent season that you might hear and go, why in the world are we reading this scripture during the course of the Advent season? We'll have the scriptures that we know and love too, but we'll also have some random ones thrown in there. So when that happens, if you hear that, just stay with it and trust that they'll all come back around again for words for the beginning. And I'm excited about it. I feel like we need a word of blessing. I feel like we need to be reminded of God's truth. We need the comfort. We need to let those truths of Advent seep into our souls. Because sometimes, some of us right now feel like we are living in troubled times. There's tension, there's division, there's so many points of crisis. There are wars and hunger and hurricanes, not to mention just the everyday troubles of our lives, illness and injury and disease and family concerns or financial concerns. It may really feel like troubled times. But Advent teaches us that God is not new to troubled times. God is not new to troubled times. In fact, look at this with me. If you've got your Bibles, if you have a Bible app, it's not going to work. But if you've got an actual Bible, I want you to turn to Malachi chapter 4, verse 6. Malachi 4:6. I hear the very small rustling of pages, so I won't make this take too long. When you've got it, hold it up. Hold it up for us. This is where the Old Testament ends. And this is where the New Testament begins. And in between these two pages are 400 years of biblical history that we don't talk about. 400 years of things happening to the Jewish people that we don't talk about. Things that would count as troubled times. Things not recorded in our scripture, but that certainly influenced everything we read about starting in Matthew chapter 1. Okay, I am going to nerd out for just a second, and you get to come with me, okay? So, in between pages, there are so many things that happen. I think I can do this from memory. There's a manger in my way, but I'm going to stand back here. So Alexander the Great had this massive empire, and his empire has crumbled, and it actually formed other empires in the wake. And one of them was the Seleucid Empire, centered in Syria, and one of them was the Ptolemy Empire, centered in Egypt. And the Seleucid Empire, at one point, like 170 BC, was ruled by this guy named Antiochus Epiphanes. And Antiochus Epiphanes was this horrible, horrible dude. And he really didn't like the Jews. He thought that his empire would be united if everybody was uniform under Greek culture, under Hellenistic culture. So he wanted everybody to be the same, to think the same, to worship the same gods. So he had no tolerance for these Jews who were worshiping a different god. You'd think that it wasn't a big deal, but in this war between the Ptolemy Empire and the Seleucid Empire, they're all vying for trade routes, and there's this teeny tiny little country right there on the verge between Europe and Asia and Africa. And who controlled this country controlled those trade routes. And thus Israel and the people of Israel were subject to the rise and fall and battles and shifting of rulers of everything. Antiochus Epiphanes did horrible things to the Jews. He killed innocents. He outlawed a lot of their religious practices. He even broke into the temple, rode his horse into the temple of God, and stole the holy furniture, the gold lampstands, the other things, and supposedly sold them to fund his wars and his empires. So he was this really evil guy, and it really all kind of came to a head when he entered the temple of God and sacrificed a pig on God's altar. A pig is an unclean animal in Judaism. So this was like this horrible moment. And from that point on, Antiochus Epiphanes actually outlawed any sacrifice to God whatsoever and said you can only sacrifice to Greek gods. So the Jews had to figure out what to do. This caused a revolt. Somebody rose up, fought against it. This is where we get the Maccabees from. This is the beginning of the Hanukkah celebration. It's all really connected, and it all happens in between this page and this page. There were wars. There was occupation. There was slaughter. Antiochus Epiphanes died shortly after the Maccabee revolt. The Seleucid Empire died with him. Then Cleopatra's over there leading the Ptolemaic Empire, and eventually her empire falls to the Roman Empire, and pretty soon, here's little Israel again, now occupied by a new kingdom, the Roman Empire. Occupation, slaughter, desecration, uprising, war, overthrow, occupation again. These were troubled times. And yet, these were the troubled times that set the stage for the birth of Jesus. This is the socio-political landscape that Jesus was born into, the socio-political climate in which God decided to come to earth. I tell you all of this to proclaim this good news. Troubled times are not new to God. God is not scared by them, and in fact, God enters into them in order to be with us. I don't know what kind of troubled times you've been facing lately or what kind of troubled times you may be worried about, but hear this reminder from Advent. God is always coming to us in troubled times. The movement of God is always a movement toward, never a movement away, even in the midst of our troubled times. And even when we feel like troubled people, see, all of those socio-political issues that Israel was facing caused generation upon generation of crisis. It caused divisions among the country, and actually one of the most stark divisions was between the northerners and the southerners. See, I don't know if y'all know this, but all the good Jews were in the south. Okay? It's true. It's true. All the good Jews were in the south. The righteous Jews were in the south. Okay? Those northerners, they were the rebels. They were known for uprisings. They were known for protests. The righteous ones were in the south, like in Bethlehem and Judea, in Jerusalem. That's where the power was. That's where the righteousness was. The Jews in the north were known for intermarrying, which was a big no-no. The Jews in the north rarely traveled south to worship in the temple, which obviously made them less righteous than the southerners. And the Jews in the north, even gave up some of the religious practices, including things like circumcision, which was like a sign of the covenant. So it was a big deal. So for everybody in the south, the Jews in the north, they were the troublemakers. They were actually known as lesser Jews. That's what the Southerners called them, lesser Jews. And yet, it was to the north, in the northern region of Galilee, in a northern town called Nazareth, where a young unknown girl named Mary was suddenly visited by an angel of the Most High God. In a time when the global theater of war was ruled and wrecked by empires. When everyone was talking about big names like Antiochus and Cleopatra and Caesar. When the eyes of the world were on the power players and their power moves, the eyes of God were on a seemingly insignificant, unknown girl from a lesser part of the world. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a town in Galilee called Nazareth to a virgin whose name was Mary. And the angel Gabriel came to her and said, "Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you." Greetings, blessed one, the Lord is with you. Here's the thing. I think sometimes the world can feel so big. There are so many power players that can make us feel like our lives are utterly insignificant or that we are less than. The world holds so many voices that try to tell us who we are and who we aren't. So many voices that say we aren't worthy, we aren't good enough, we don't really matter. And then they tell us all the reasons why. For some of us, those voices have been passed down from generation to generation through our family or through our culture. For some of us, there are voices that claim that your body or your abilities or your mind or your personhood isn't as valuable as somebody else's. Some of us have heard our whole lives that we're lesser, like the lesser Jews in the north, never good enough, never strong enough, not rich enough, not good looking enough, not skilled enough, not young enough, not smart enough, not holy enough. Fill in the blank. And for some of us, maybe those voices that are inside are even worse than the voices outside. I have a friend who, when he was in high school, he tried out for his varsity basketball team. He didn't know if he was going to make it. He thought he was pretty good. He thought he was above average, but he wasn't totally sure. And so he tried out for the team, and to his delight and his surprise, he made the varsity team. Only he still never really believed it. He never really accepted it. He never really thought that he deserved to be there. He still felt like he wasn't good enough. He didn't believe his coaches when they said, no, you earned your spot on the team. He didn't believe his teammates when they would encourage him. And because he was listening to his own voice inside his head telling him that he wasn't as good as they were, that he really didn't agree, that he really shouldn't be here, that he really wasn't good enough to be on the team, he says that he never actually grew into that role. He never felt like he fit or like he belonged. He said he made the team, but that was about it. He didn't play much. He wasn't a starter. He never made the really cool move. But it wasn't for his own lack of ability. It was because of his own voice telling him that he didn't belong, that he wasn't good enough. Maybe some of us can relate to this. Maybe some of us in our heart or in our mind, you can name all the reasons why you're less than or not as good. Maybe you're carrying around regrets or failures or shame or limiting beliefs. I wonder what Mary was carrying around. Mary, this girl in the midst of empire, this girl from the northern region of Israel with its stereotypes of place and people. I wonder what kind of voices she had heard throughout her life, being from the north, being from this tiny country that was ruled by all of these other empires, people who used her and her people like pawns. I wonder how many voices tried to convince her that she was insignificant or not good enough or less than. And I wonder if any part of her believed it. And then she heard a different voice. A messenger of God. The voice of the one true God. And it was a voice that called her favored. A voice that declared that she was blessed among women. A voice that promised that the Lord was with her. This voice echoed what we heard from the prophet Isaiah, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. The waves will not overtake you. You are precious in my sight, the Lord said. You are honored, and I love you. Which voice should Mary listen to? The voices that deemed her a lesser Jew, insignificant in the grand scheme of things? Or the one that said God is with her? The one that said she is a blessing? Which voice should Mary listen to? And which voice should we listen to? Here's the thing. Mary's story begins with blessedness, and so does ours. Mary's story begins with blessedness, and so does yours. The God who called Mary blessed among women is also the God who calls you by name. The God who says, I will be with you. You are precious in my sight. You are mine. Good news for us on this cold Advent morning. Good news for us in the midst of this new Advent beginning. You are a blessing. You are a blessing just like Mary. You are a blessing because you belong to God. You are a blessing because God is with you. You matter. You are significant. You are a blessing. I don't know what kind of voices you've heard through the years. I don't know what kind of messages still impact you. But as we begin this new Advent season, as we begin again, I hope we'll each listen to the other voice, the true voice, the voice of God that tells us of our own blessedness and our own belovedness. The voice of the God who is coming, always coming to be with us. You are a blessing, and I wonder, do you believe it? If you've never believed it before, or if you haven't believed it in a while, may this Advent be your new beginning. You are blessed.